I need to be completely honest with you before we begin this journey together. The story you are about to hear did not happen. Bruce Lee died in July 1973. At that time, a young man named Terry Bollea, who would later become known to the world as Hulk Hogan, was just 20 years old, playing bass guitar in Florida bar bands, still years away from stepping into a wrestling ring for the first time. They never met. History did not give us that gift. But here's what I know with absolute certainty. If they had met, if some twist of fate had brought together the greatest martial artist who ever lived and the man who would become the most iconic professional wrestler in history, something extraordinary would have happened. Something that would have changed both of their lives. Something that would have revealed truths about size and speed, about power and timing, about what it really means to be a fighter. So this story is not journalism. It is not biography. It is a dream made of words. A vision of what should have been. A tribute to two men who dominated their respective worlds and who, in my imagination at least, would have recognized something profound in each other. I am asking you to trust me, to let go of dates and timelines, to step with me into a space where legend meets legend and something beautiful is born from their collision. Can you do that? Can you come with me into the impossible? Then close your eyes for just a moment. Take a breath and follow me to a gym in Los Angeles, 1972, where a young giant named Terry Bollea is about to discover that everything he believes about power is wrong. The Gold's Gym in Venice Beach was a cathedral of muscle. Iron plates stacked like offerings on every surface. The smell of sweat and chalk and desperate ambition hung in the air like incense. Men who looked like they'd been carved from stone moved between the equipment, their bodies monuments to thousands of hours of dedicated suffering. This was the place where champions were built, where ordinary men transformed themselves into something superhuman through sheer force of will. And standing in the center of it all, completing a set of bicep curls with dumbbells that most men could not lift once, was a young man who made everyone else in the room look small. Terry Bollea was 20 years old, and he was already a giant. 6 feet, 7 inches tall, 280 pounds of muscle that seemed to have been designed by a sculptor with a flair for the dramatic. His arms were thicker than most men's thighs. His chest was a wall of flesh that blocked out the light. When he walked, the floor seemed to vibrate with each step, as if the building itself was acknowledging his presence. He had come to California from Florida with a simple plan: get noticed, get signed, become a professional wrestler. He had the size for it. Everyone said so. He had the look, the presence, the raw physical charisma that made people stop and stare. All he needed was an opportunity, and he was certain that opportunity was coming. How could it not? He was the biggest, strongest, most impressive physical specimen most people had ever seen. I want you to understand something about Terry Bollea at 20. He was not cruel. He was not malicious. But he had spent his entire life being told that his size made him special, that his strength was a gift, that the sheer physical reality of his body meant that he would always be dominant, always be powerful, always be the one that others had to accommodate and respect. This is what happens when you grow up larger than everyone around you. You start to believe that size is destiny, that the universe rewards the big and punishes the small, that power flows naturally from muscles and mass and the ability to physically overwhelm anyone who stands in your way. It is not an evil belief, but it is a limited one, and limited beliefs eventually collide with reality in painful ways. Have you ever believed something so completely that you could not imagine being wrong? Have you ever built your entire identity on a foundation that later turned out to be incomplete? Think about how that felt when the cracks first appeared. Hold that feeling, because you're about to watch it happen to a young man who thought he understood power. The confrontation began, as so many significant moments do, with an accident of timing. Terry was finishing his workout, his muscles pumped and swollen from 2 hours of intense lifting, when a small group entered the gym. This was not unusual. Gold's attracted visitors constantly, curious tourists who wanted to see the famous bodybuilders, aspiring athletes seeking advice, celebrities looking for trainers. Terry barely glanced at them as he loaded more weight onto the bar. but something made him look again. In the center of the group was a small man. Asian, maybe 5'7", wearing simple dark clothing that somehow looked more expensive than anything else in the room. He moved differently than the bodybuilders, with a fluid economy that suggested his body was an instrument rather than an ornament. And his eyes, when they swept across the gym, held an intensity that made even the most massive men look away. Terry did not look away. He was too big to be intimidated, too confident to feel threatened by anyone, especially someone who looked like he weighed less than Terry's left leg. "Who's the little guy?" he asked the trainer standing nearby. The trainer's eyes widened. "You don't know? That's Bruce Lee, the martial artist, the movie star. He's the most famous fighter in the world right now." Terry snorted. "Fighter? Him? He's tiny. I could break him in half without trying." He said it loudly enough to be heard. He wanted it to be heard. He wanted the small man to know that there was someone in this gym who was not impressed by his reputation, someone who understood that real power came from size and strength, not from movie tricks and choreographed fights. The small group around Bruce Lee fell silent. The man himself stopped walking and turned slowly to face the direction of the comment. His expression did not change, but something shifted in the air, a tension that made the temperature in the gym seem to drop several degrees. "I'm sorry," Bruce said, and his voice was soft but carried clearly across the space between them. "Did you say something?" Terry set down his weights and stood to his full height, using every inch of his 6 feet 7 inches. He walked toward Bruce with the easy confidence of a man who had never met anyone he could not physically dominate. "I said you're tiny. I said I could break you in half. No offense meant, little man, but where I come from, real fighters don't look like they need a stepladder to reach the cookie jar." Nervous laughter from somewhere in the gym. The bodybuilders watched with the fascination of spectators at an impending car crash. Everyone could see what was happening, but no one quite believed it. This giant kid was actually mocking Bruce Lee to his face. Bruce studied the young man before him with an expression that Terry could not quite read. There was no anger in it, no offense taken. There was something closer to curiosity, as if Terry were an interesting specimen that had wandered into Bruce's field of view. "You are very large," Bruce acknowledged. "Very strong. I can see that you have worked hard to build your body. That is admirable." Terry felt a flush of pride. Even this famous martial artist had to acknowledge his physical superiority. "But I wonder," Bruce continued, and something in his tone made Terry's pride curdle slightly, "if you understand what strength actually is, what power actually means. You believe that your size makes you dominant, that your muscles make you dangerous. But size is just mass. Muscles are just tissue. Neither of them mean anything without timing." Terry laughed, a big booming laugh that echoed off the walls. "Timing? Little man, I've got 300 pounds on you. I could time my punches with a calendar, and you still couldn't stop me. When I hit someone, they stay hit. That's power. That's what real fighters understand." "Ah." Bruce nodded slowly, as if Terry had confirmed something he suspected. "You believe that force is power. This is a common mistake, one that I would be happy to correct if you are willing to learn." The challenge hung in the air. Terry felt his competitive instincts flare. This small man was actually suggesting that he could teach a lesson to someone twice his size. The arrogance was almost admirable. "What did you have in mind?" "Something simple. I will stand here, exactly where I am now. You will try to grab me. Not hit me, not hurt me, just grab me. Put your hands on me anywhere, any way you want. I will not move my feet from this position. I will use only my hands to redirect you." Bruce smiled slightly. "You have 9 seconds. If you can grab me even once in those 9 seconds, I will admit that size is everything and apologize for wasting your time." Terry stared at him in disbelief. This had to be a joke. The man was offering to stand still while Terry, with his massive reach and overwhelming size advantage, tried to grab him. It was not a challenge. It was suicide. "You're serious." "I'm always serious about teaching." Terry looked around the gym, making sure everyone was watching. This was going to be the easiest victory of his life. He was going to grab this little movie star and hold him up like a trophy, and everyone would see that real power came from real size, not from camera tricks and foreign fighting styles. "All right, little man, your funeral. If this moment is resonating with you, if you feel the tension building between these two men, then take a moment to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Because what happens in the next 9 seconds will change how you think about power forever. Terry set himself, his massive arms, thick as tree trunks, spread wide to cut off any avenue of escape. His legs, pillars of muscle that had squatted 600 pounds, bent slightly in preparation to lunge. He was a wall of flesh, a barricade of bone and sinew, the largest and most physically imposing person Bruce Lee had ever faced. He lunged. His arms swept inward like the doors of a vault closing, designed to trap Bruce in an embrace that would prove once and for all that size was the only power that mattered. His movement was fast for a man his size, driven by thousands of hours of athletic training. He should have caught Bruce easily. There was nowhere for the smaller man to go. Terry's wingspan was nearly 7 feet. The space between his arms was closing like a vice. His arms closed on nothing. Bruce was not there. He was 2 feet to the left, standing with the same relaxed posture, as if he had never been in Terry's path at all. But Terry's eyes had never left him. He had watched the entire time, and yet somehow, impossibly, the smaller man had moved without seeming to move at all. Terry stumbled slightly, his momentum carrying him forward into empty space. He caught himself and spun, confusion beginning to replace confidence. What the hell? 1 second, Bruce said calmly. 8 remaining. Terry attacked again, faster this time, his competitive fury adding speed to his already considerable athleticism. He did not try to grab with both arms. He shot out his right hand, targeting Bruce's shoulder, using his incredible reach to close the distance before the smaller man could react. His hand found air. Bruce had shifted again, just slightly, just enough, and Terry's grasping fingers passed within an inch of their target without making contact. 2 seconds. Now Terry was breathing harder, and it was not from exertion. It was from something he had never felt before, something that felt uncomfortably like fear. This small man was making him look foolish, was demonstrating that his size and strength meant nothing, and Terry did not understand how it was happening. He abandoned technique entirely. He threw himself at Bruce with the full force of his 280 pounds, attempting to simply overwhelm the smaller man through sheer mass. It was a tackle that would have destroyed anyone foolish enough to stand in its path, a human avalanche that should have been impossible to avoid at such close range. Bruce flowed around it like water around a stone. One moment he was in front of the charging giant. The next moment he was beside him, and as Terry stumbled past, off balance and confused, he felt something touch his ankle. Not a kick, not a strike, just a touch, light as a whisper. But it was enough. His momentum, already compromised by his missed tackle, became uncontrollable. His feet tangled with each other, and Terry Bollea, the biggest and strongest man in the room, crashed to the floor of Gold's Gym like a felled redwood. The impact shook the building. Weights rattled on their racks. The other bodybuilders stared in stunned silence. Terry lay on the ground, his breath coming in gasps, his mind struggling to process what had just happened. He had been touched once, barely touched, and he had lost his balance completely. He, who had never been knocked down by anyone, who had believed his size made him immune to physical defeat, was lying on his back looking up at a man who weighed less than half what he did. 5 seconds had passed. The 9 seconds Bruce had promised were not even finished. Bruce looked down at him with an expression that held no mockery, no contempt. There was only patience and perhaps a hint of compassion. "Do you understand now?" Bruce asked softly. 140 kilos cannot catch timing. Size is an advantage only when it can make contact. Speed is power only when it connects with its target. But timing, true timing, makes contact before the opponent knows it has happened. Timing turns your size against you. Timing uses your momentum as a weapon. He extended his hand to help Terry up. After a moment's hesitation, the giant took it and allowed himself to be pulled to his feet. His legs were unsteady. His certainty was shattered. "Ow!" Terry breathed. "How is that possible? I was watching you the whole time. I never looked away, but I couldn't see you move. Because you were looking for the wrong things. You were watching my body, waiting for large movements, for the obvious signs that I was about to dodge. But I do not dodge. I redirect. A move before your attack begins, not after. By the time your brain sends the signal to your arms, I have already read your intention. I am already somewhere else. Bruce led him to a bench and gestured for him to sit. Terry obeyed automatically, too disoriented to assert his usual dominance. "Let me explain something to you," Bruce said, sitting across from him. "You have been given a gift. Your size, your strength, your physical presence. These are real advantages that most people will never have. But you have made the mistake of believing that your gift is the only kind of power that exists." He held up his hand, spreading his fingers. "Imagine that this hand is power. Most people believe power has only one finger, the finger of physical strength. They train that finger until it is huge and impressive. And yes, that finger can do damage. But there are 4 other fingers they have ignored: speed, timing, technique, perception. A complete fighter develops all 5 fingers. And when all 5 work together, they become something greater than the sum of their parts." Terry listened with the desperate attention of a man whose world had just been turned upside down. Every word Bruce spoke was landing like a revelation, filling in spaces that Terry had not even known were empty. "Your strength is real," Bruce continued. "I am not asking you to abandon it. I am asking you to understand that it is not enough by itself. When you attacked me, you relied entirely on your size. You assumed that your reach and your mass would be sufficient to overwhelm any defense. But I was not trying to defend against your strength. I was attacking your timing. I was moving before you moved, acting before you acted. Your size became a liability because you could not redirect it fast enough. But how do you see it coming?" Terry asked. "How do you know what I'm going to do before I do it?" "Because every attack is announced before it begins. Your eyes focus on your target. Your shoulders shift. Your weight transfers. Your breathing changes. These signals are small, measured in millimeters and milliseconds. But they exist. And if you learn to read them, you can know what attack is coming before it is thrown." He tapped his own temple. "The fight happens here first. Always. The body is just following orders from the mind. I'm not faster than your grab. Your arms move more quickly than mine. But I'm faster than your decision to grab. By the time you have finished deciding, I have already finished responding." Terry sat in silence, processing everything he had heard and experienced. The other bodybuilders had gradually returned to their workouts, though many kept glancing toward the conversation with barely concealed curiosity. The small group that had arrived with Bruce stood at a respectful distance, understanding that something important was happening. "I've been wrong," Terry finally said, and the admission cost him something. His pride, his certainty, the foundation on which he had built his entire identity. "I thought size was everything. I thought being the biggest meant being the best. But you're half my size, and you made me look like a child. I made you look like a student who has not yet finished learning," Bruce corrected gently. "There is no shame in that. We are all students. The only shame is in refusing to learn." He stood and offered Terry his hand once more, this time in fellowship rather than assistance. "You have something special. I can see it. Not just your size, although that is impressive. You have charisma, presence, the ability to make people watch you, to capture their attention and hold it. These gifts are rare and valuable." Terry shook his hand, feeling the power in the smaller man's grip, understanding now that this power had nothing to do with muscle mass. "But gifts must be developed," Bruce continued. "They must be combined with skill and understanding. If you rely only on your size, you will always be vulnerable to someone who understands timing. If you develop your timing to match your size, you will become something truly formidable. If you are feeling the transformation happening in this young man, if you recognize something of yourself in his journey from arrogance to humility, then please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Because what happens next changed the course of entertainment history. Bruce spent the next 2 hours with Terry in a corner of the gym, teaching principles that the young giant had never encountered. Not techniques exactly, but ways of seeing, ways of understanding combat that went beyond the simple physics of larger beats smaller. He He taught Terry about economy of motion, about not wasting energy on movements that were larger than necessary. He showed him how a slight shift of weight could redirect an opponent's attack, how positioning could neutralize size advantages, how the mind could be targeted as effectively as the body. In wrestling, Bruce said at one point, "You will face opponents who are as large as you, perhaps larger. Your size advantage will disappear. What will you have then? If you have only trained your body, you will have nothing. But if you have trained your mind, your timing, your ability to read opponents and anticipate their actions, you will have everything." Terry absorbed every word like a sponge. The arrogance that had defined him that morning was gone, replaced by a hunger for knowledge that he had never felt before. For the first time in his life, he understood that he had been living in a small room, believing it was the entire house. Bruce had opened a door and shown him how much more there was to explore. "Why are you helping me?" Terry asked as the afternoon light began to fade. "I insulted you. I mocked your size. I was an arrogant kid who thought he knew everything. Why not just humiliate me and walk away?" Bruce considered the question carefully before answering. "Because I was you, in a different way. When I was young, I believed that my speed made me special, that my techniques made me superior. I mocked those who could not keep up with me. And then I met someone who showed me how wrong I was. Someone who humbled me and then taught me instead of destroying me." He looked at Terry with something that might have been affection. "That person changed my life. They turned my arrogance into a gift instead of curse. Now I try to do the same for others." It is how wisdom passes from generation to generation, not by punishing those who are wrong, but by teaching them to be right. Terry felt something shift inside him, a fundamental reorientation that would take years to fully manifest. The young man who had walked into the gym that morning, certain of his own superiority, was already beginning to disappear. In his place, something new was being born. "Will I see you again?" he asked. "Is there more you can teach me?" "There is always more to learn, but our paths may not cross often. I am leaving soon for Hong Kong to make films that I hope will change how the world sees martial arts. You have your own path to walk, your own destiny to fulfill." Bruce reached into his pocket and withdrew a small piece of paper. He wrote something on it and pressed it into Terry's massive palm. "This is the principle I want you to remember. It will guide you through everything that comes. When you are confused, when you are struggling, when your size fails you and you do not know what to do, remember these words." Terry looked at the paper. In careful handwriting, Bruce had written, "Timing beats size. Mind beats muscle. The battle is won before the first move is made. Train your mind as hard as you have trained your body," Bruce said. "Learn to read opponents, to anticipate their actions, to be where they do not expect you to be. Your size will always be your first weapon, but timing will be the weapon that wins when size fails." They stood together in the fading light of the gym, the giant and the dragon, two men whose paths had crossed briefly but significantly. Terry extended his hand, and Bruce shook it one final time. "Thank you," Terry said, and the words carried more weight than any he had ever spoken. "Thank you for not walking away. Thank you for teaching instead of just defeating." Bruce smiled. "Thank me by passing it on. When you meet young people who are arrogant, who believe that their gifts make them superior, remember this day. Humble them gently. Teach them patiently. Transform their arrogance into wisdom, as mine was transformed, as yours is being transformed now." Then he was gone, walking out of Gold's Gym with his small entourage, disappearing into the Los Angeles evening on his way to a destiny that would be cut tragically short. Terry stood holding the piece of paper for a long time after Bruce left. The other bodybuilders eventually approached him, curious about what had happened, what had been said, what could possibly have humbled the biggest man any of them had ever seen. Terry told them nothing. Some lessons are too personal to share. Some transformations happen in private, in the space between heartbeats, in a moment when everything you believed is revealed to be incomplete. He put the paper in his pocket, where it would stay for years, transfer from one set of clothes to another, carried through every stage of his remarkable journey from Florida bar musician to the most famous professional wrestler the world had ever seen. The years that followed were not easy. Terry Bollea did become a professional wrestler. He adopted the name Hulk Hogan, transformed himself into a character of almost cartoonish proportions, became the face of world wrestling entertainment during its most explosive period of growth. He won championships. He sold out arenas. He became an icon recognized by billions of people around the world. And through all of it, he remembered the lesson from that afternoon in Gold's Gym. Timing beats size. Mind beats muscle. The battle is won before the first move is made. His wrestling career was built on this foundation. Yes, he was enormous. Yes, his strength was genuine and impressive. But what made Hulk Hogan a legend was not his size. It was his timing, his ability to read an audience and know exactly when to hulk up, when to point at his opponent, when to deliver the leg drop that would send crowds into ecstasy. He understood that wrestling was not about physical domination. It was about psychological timing, about knowing exactly when to give the audience what they wanted. In interviews, when asked about his influences, Hogan sometimes mentioned martial arts. He spoke about the importance of timing, about reading opponents, about understanding that the mental aspects of performance were more important than the physical. Those who knew him well noticed that he carried a worn piece of paper in his wallet, though he never showed anyone what was written on it. Only once, in a late-night conversation with a trusted friend, did he tell the full story. The story of a young giant who thought size was everything. The story of a small man who proved him wrong in 9 seconds. The story of a lesson that transformed arrogance into wisdom and launched a career that would change entertainment history. He could have destroyed me, Hogan said, his voice roughened by age but still carrying the intensity of memory. I was disrespectful. I was arrogant. I deserved to be humiliated. But instead, he taught me. He saw something in me worth saving, and he saved it. He paused, and something shifted in his famous face. The showman disappeared, and in his place was the young man who had picked himself up off the floor of Gold's Gym, changed forever. Everything I achieved, every championship, every moment when the crowd roared my name, all of it goes back to that afternoon. To Bruce Lee, to a lesson about timing that I have never forgotten. The news of Bruce Lee's death reached Terry Bollea in the summer of 1973. He was still a struggling wrestler then, still working small venues and trying to get noticed. But when he heard that the man who had changed his life was gone, he stopped everything. He took out the worn piece of paper and read the words that had become his guiding principle. Timing beats size. Mind beats muscle. The battle is won before the first move is made. He made a promise that day. He would honor Bruce's memory by living those words. He would develop his timing until it became as legendary as his size. He would read opponents and audiences with the same precision that Bruce had read him. And someday, when he had achieved the success that Bruce had predicted, he would pass the lesson on to others. If you have traveled with me this far, if you have felt the weight of this encounter and what it meant for both men, then please take a moment to like this video and subscribe to this channel. Your support allows us to continue telling these stories, honoring these legends, keeping their wisdom alive for new generations. The final scene of this story takes place decades later, in a backstage area before a major wrestling event. Hulk Hogan, now older, his body carrying the wear of thousands of matches, is speaking with a young wrestler who reminds him of himself at 20. The young man is enormous. 6'5", 270 pounds of sculpted muscle. He moves with the arrogant confidence of someone who believes his size makes him special, makes him destined for greatness, makes him immune to failure. Hogan recognizes that look. He wore it himself a lifetime ago. You think your size is going to carry you, Hogan says, and the young wrestler looks at him with barely concealed condescension. You think being the biggest guy in the room means you're going to be the biggest star. I used to think that too. The young wrestler shrugs. Worked for you, didn't it? You're the biggest name in wrestling history. Hogan smiles, and there is something in that smile that makes the young man suddenly uncertain. Let me tell you a story. A story about a young giant who thought exactly like you do, and about a small man who taught him that size means nothing without timing. He tells the story. The Gold's Gym. The challenge. The 9 seconds that changed everything. The lesson about timing and mind, and the battle being won before the first move is made. When he finishes, he reaches into his wallet and withdraws a piece of paper so worn it is almost falling apart. The words are barely visible, faded by decades of handling, but Hogan knows them by heart. Bruce Lee gave me this. It has guided me through my entire career, and now I'm going to give it to you. Not because you deserve it yet, but because I see something in you that is worth saving, the same way Bruce saw something in me. He presses the paper into the young wrestler's hand. Timing beats size. Mind beats muscle. The battle is won before the first move is made. Learn this. Live this. And when you meet a young person who is as arrogant as you are now, pass it on. The young wrestler looks at the paper, then back at Hogan. Something is shifting in his eyes. The arrogance is still there, but cracks are forming. Doubt is seeping in. The first signs of transformation are beginning. I don't understand, he says. How can timing beat size? I'm huge. No one can stop me. Hogan smiles, and for just a moment, he is back in that gym in Venice Beach, lying on his back, looking up at a small man who had just proven him completely wrong. You will understand, he says. By the end of your first year in this business, you will understand. And when you do, you will remember this conversation. You will remember that someone tried to save you the pain of learning it the hard way. He turns to walk away, then pauses. Or you won't listen. You'll rely on your size, and you'll have some success, and then you'll meet someone whose timing is better than your muscles. And you'll end up on your back, wondering what happened, just like I did. Either way, the lesson will come. The only question is whether you learn it from wisdom or from pain. He walks away, leaving the young wrestler holding a piece of paper that has traveled through 50 years and 2 legendary careers. The paper that carries the words of a dragon. The lesson that transformed a giant. The wisdom that passes from generation to generation, from master to student, from legend to legend. Timing beats size. Mind beats muscle. The battle is won before the first move is made. Thank you for watching. Thank you for coming with me on this journey through a meeting that never happened but contains truths that are eternal. If this story has touched you, please subscribe to this channel. Hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. And share this with someone who needs to hear it. Someone who might be relying too much on their natural gifts. Someone who needs to learn that the greatest advantages mean nothing without the wisdom to use them properly. Because we are all giants in some way. We all have gifts that we are tempted to rely on too heavily. We all need someone to show us that our greatest strengths can become our greatest weaknesses if we do not develop the timing and awareness to use them wisely. Bruce Lee taught that lesson to a young giant in 1972. That giant became Hulk Hogan and taught it to millions. And now, perhaps, the lesson passes to you. Timing beats size. What will you do with that knowledge?